If you had $260 million sitting in the bank, would you spend it on building a public park? In the last episode, we talked about Pier 25 at the southern end of Hudson River Park, then Piers 26, 34, and up to Pier 40. In this episode, we continue north to the meatpacking district area, Gansevoort Peninsula, Little Island, and Pier 57. Starting at Gansevoort Peninsula, the whole park was designed by Field Operations and opened in 2023. On the south side of the park, there's a cool art installation called Day's End, with one half standing in the water and the other half on land. This place used to be Pier 52. Back in the 1970s, the semi-abandoned Pier 52 was a popular spot for the LGBTQ community and artists. In 1975, artist Gordon Matta Clark carved 5 huge holes in the building at Pier 52, some in the roof, some in the walls, and some in the floor. These holes gave you a view of the sky, the river below, and the scenery across the river, and also let light into the building. He called this piece Day's End. Naturally, the city wasn't too happy and sued him for property damage. The pier and the building were demolished in 1977. In 2014, artist David Hammonds was invited to visit the newly completed Whitney Museum. While standing by a window with the museum's director, they talked about the history of the Hudson River waterfront. A few days later, David Hammond sent a small sketch to the director as a proposal for an outdoor artwork. His idea was to create a framework that outlined the original structure of Pier 52 at its former location, commemorating the history of the waterfront and the events that happened at the pier. To honor Gordon Matta Clark's 1975 work, Hammonds named his piece Day's End as well. The Whitney Museum loved the idea and supported it. And by 2021, the outdoor art installation was completed and donated to Hudson River Park. As for the entire Gansevoort Peninsula, it's called the Peninsula because it was created through land reclamation. Unlike a pier that's supported by piles standing in the water, this land juts out from the coastline as a peninsula due to the now vanished 13th Avenue of Manhattan. Today, the farthest west avenue in Manhattan is 12th Avenue, which is part of the West Side Highway. But back in 1837, when Manhattan was a bustling port, New York City had plans to extend the land outward along the Hudson River from 11th Street to 135th Street, adding the width of an extra block and calling it 13th Avenue. The idea was for developers to buy these new land parcels from the government and then fill in the land from the river. In reality, 13th Avenue was only filled in from 11th Street to 23rd Street. By the late 19th century, with the rise of transatlantic shipping and larger ships like the Titanic, wider channels and longer piers were needed. Building piers from 13th Avenue for such large ships would have made the river too narrow. To fix this, New York City dismantled most of the reclaimed land and 13th Avenue, allowing for the construction of Chelsea piers to accommodate large vessels. The only land left from this project is now the Gansevoort Peninsula. The west side of this peninsula is the only remaining part of 13th Avenue. In the early 20th century, the peninsula was mostly used for warehousing, with piers extending from its north, south, and west sides. By the late 20th century, as Manhattan's river shipping declined, the peninsula became a parking and salt storage area for the New York City Department of Sanitation, while the nearby piers fell into semi-abandoned states. After the original New York City Department of Sanitation building was demolished in 2016, the land was incorporated into the Hudson River Park. In 2019, planning and design began to transform the Gansevoort Peninsula into a park. Let's go back to the current state of the Gansevoort Peninsula. A resilient southern edge provides direct access to the Hudson River for non-motorized boats. Moving north, there is the first public beach in Manhattan. The park on this entire peninsula offers various open spaces, including a multi-purpose sports field covered with grass. On the north side of Gansevoort Peninsula, you'll find Manhattan's first salt marsh on the Hudson River. This area is filled with native grasses and plants, plus submerged reef bowls and oyster gabions with 20 million young oysters. It creates a valuable habitat, boosts resiliency, and offers a great way for the public to learn about the benefits of intertidal ecosystems. From the north, west, and south sides of the peninsula, you can see 3 different waterfront interface designs, instead of a single seawall cutting the river off from the land. On the eastern side of the peninsula, near the West Side Highway, there is a park pavilion designed by N Architects. This pavilion features a canopy connecting 3 separate structures that serve as public restrooms and concessions. The large openings in the canopy are inspired by the holes Gordon Matta Clark carved into the building at Pier 52 in 1975. Lastly, at the northwest corner of the peninsula there is a small pier, Pier 53, which serves as the fire station on the Hudson River. If a pier or boat on the Hudson River catches fire, the fireboat from Pier 53 will respond since fire trucks can't reach the water. Just north of Gansevoort Peninsula, you'll find Little Island. This unique park, designed by Thomas Heatherwick and the landscape architects at MNLA, looks like it's floating on the water and opened in 2021. The story behind its development is just as interesting as its design. It all started back in 2011 when Pier 54, right north of Gansevoort Peninsula, began to show signs of collapse due to old age and had to be closed. Pier 54 is famous for being the dock where the ship-carrying Titanic survivors arrived. Once it became part of Hudson River Park, Pier 54 hosted various events, including the 2005 Nomadic Museum, a temporary, movable art museum designed by Shigeru Ban. In late 2011, at a fundraising event for the High Line, a conversation between 2 key people sparked the idea to rebuild Pier 54. These 2 were Diana Taylor, chair of the Hudson River Park Trust and partner of Michael Bloomberg, and Barry Diller, chairman of IAC, and a major supporter of the High Line, along with his wife, fashion designer Diane von Furstenberg. During the event, Diana shared the plan to rebuild Pier 54, which was estimated to cost $35 million, and asked Barry if he was interested. Barry was intrigued, but had an even more ambitious vision in mind. By 2014, the Hudson River Park Trust and Barry Diller announced a new park at Pier 55, designed by Thomas Heatherwick. This park was planned to sit between the soon-to-be-demolished Pier 54 and the already demolished Pier 56, with an estimated cost of $160 million. However, in 2015, the City Club of New York filed a lawsuit to stop the project, citing environmental concerns. The lawsuit was backed by Douglas Durst, a real estate developer who seemed to have a personal vendetta against Diller. With these legal challenges and costs escalating to $200 million, Barry Diller announced in September 2017 that he was abandoning the project. Coincidentally, just a month earlier, another park-on-the-water project designed by Heatherwick, the Garden Bridge in London, was also abandoned due to high costs. Yet a month after Diller's announcement, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo stepped in and the Pier 55 project was back on. Construction finally started in 2018 and the park, now called Little Island, opened in 2021. By then, the cost had soared to $260 million, with the city and state contributing $17 million and $18 million respectively. Barry Diller covered the rest and even agreed to fund Little Island's maintenance and operations for the next 20 years, at an estimated additional cost of $120 million. Seems like Diller had a deep passion for this project. Given his dedication and the park's benefits, even if it were called Diller's Island, I wouldn't mind. After all, he's providing a beautiful park for everyone to enjoy. As for the design of Little Island, I find it incredibly romantic. When you look at Little Island from the shore, you'll see numerous concrete pilings emerging from the water, contrasting with the wooden pilings left from Piers 54 and 56 on either side. These concrete pilings rise above the water and transform into tulip-shaped structures. There are 132 of these pilings, or tulips of varying heights, clustered together to create the park's undulating terrain. This rolling landscape mirrors the undulating water surface below. As you walk from the Esplanade to Little Island, you'll first come across the historic archway from the old Chelsea Piers, now serving as a symbolic gateway. Then you'll cross the South Bridge, passing between the pilings and under the tulip-shaped structures as you make your way into the park. Outside, you see architecture. Inside, you're surrounded by nature. The park's varied terrain is filled with diverse plants, offering different views and experiences throughout the year and at different times of day. The changing colors, forms, and scents sway with the sea breeze, creating a dynamic atmosphere. The park's spaces range from open lawns and an outdoor theater to intimate winding paths that lead you to the highest points of the park. From there, you can look back at the park's landscape or enjoy views of the Hudson River's sunset or Manhattan's skyline. Do you think a park this romantic or even healing is worth $260 million? If I had the money, I think I'd happily spend it. Heading north from Little Island, you'll find Pier 57. The current Pier 57 building was constructed in 1954, but before that, there was another building here, built in 1907. Unfortunately, that original building was destroyed by a fire in 1947. The new building, which we see today, was quite an engineering feat at the time. What makes Pier 57 special isn't just a two-story steel structure above water, but the concrete structure below. Typically, a pier's foundation is made up of many piles driven into the riverbed, making the pier appear to stand in the water. But Pier 57 is different. It actually floats on the water. This is because it has three massive concrete caissons, which are basically large submerged boxes below the water. These caissons create buoyancy because their density is less than that of water, so they float instead of sinking. The space inside the caisson serves as the building's basement, and their buoyancy supports the structure above. Engineers had already used this buoyancy concept during World War II to create floating concrete caissons for artificial harbors in Normandy. However, this technique is rarely used now because placing such large caissons in the water displaces a significant volume of water, which can negatively impact the Hudson River's ecosystem, making it unlikely to pass modern environmental reviews. Due to its innovative construction and unique engineering, Pier 57 was designated a National Historic Landmark in 2004. After it was completed in 1954, this building served as a shipping pier until 1967. Then, from 1971 to 2003, it was used as a bus depot for the New York City Transit Authority. A lot happened in 2004. First, the building was designated as a historic landmark. After the Transit Authority moved out, the building briefly became a detention center during the Republican National Convention in New York City. It held over 1,000 protesters who were arrested during demonstrations against President George W. Bush as he campaigned for re-election after a first term shaped by the 9/11 attacks and the Iraq War. During this time, the media dubbed Pier 57 Guantanamo on the Hudson, comparing the detention center's practices to the controversial ones at Guantanamo Bay. Later in 2004, Pier 57 was handed over to the Hudson River Park Trust for management as part of the Hudson River Park Act. This pier is one of the few in the park that allows for commercial development, with the aim of using revenue from these developments to support the park's overall operations and maintenance. In 2004, the Hudson River Park Trust issued an RFP request for proposals, seeking ideas for redeveloping Pier 57. The following year, a team led by the Witkoff Group and the Italian hospitality group Cipriani won the bid. However, after some issues and controversies, the trust reopened the RFP process in 2008, and in 2009, the developer Young Woo and Associates won the bid. Their proposal, designed by the firm Lawtech, aimed to transform the existing Pier 57 structure into a mixed-use space combining public areas and commercial spaces. The design included a food hall, office spaces for startups, and a rooftop public park that would also serve as an outdoor cinema for the Tribeca Film Festival. Lawtech's love for repurposing shipping containers was evident in the design elements. After winning the bid, the developer secured the rights to lease Pier 57 from the Hudson River Park Trust for 49 years. In 2011, Youngwoo and Associates brought on Handel Architects to handle the preservation and restoration of the existing structure, while the landscape architecture firm Melk was tasked with designing the rooftop park. The project passed environmental reviews and ULURP, Uniform Land Use Review Procedure, in 2013, clearing the way for rezoning. After these approvals, Lawtech's involvement in the project seemed to end. In 2014, Youngwoo brought in another developer, RXR Realty, to focus on the office space aspects of the development. In 2015, Google signed a 15-year lease with the developers, becoming the largest tenant at Pier 57. Google also hired dealers Scofidio and Renfro to design their interior spaces at the pier. It's worth mentioning that just across the street from Pier 57 to the east is Chelsea Market, which Google purchased in 2018. To the east of Chelsea Market is another building that Google bought back in 2010. So now, Google occupies space across 3 consecutive city blocks, including Pier 57. Originally, celebrity chef Anthony Bourdain planned to open a food market called Bourdain Market at Pier 57, but he abandoned the project in 2017. Google ended up leasing the space that Bourdain had planned to use. The redevelopment of Pier 57 officially began in 2016, with the developer signing a 97-year lease with the Hudson River Park Trust. By 2023, most of the redevelopment was completed. Although the final design remains conceptually similar to the initial proposal, the shipping container elements that Lotec originally included were dropped after they left the project. The completed pier now includes public spaces, such as a food hall and common areas on the ground floor, as well as a rooftop park, which is probably the best spot to capture views of Little Island. The second floor houses Google's offices, with DSR's interior design transforming the sloped ramps originally used for parking into a connection between the building's entrance and Google's office space on the second floor. However, it's still unclear how the basement space within the caissons will be utilized. Overall, the redevelopment project has cost about $410 million. The Hudson River Park Trust secured future funds for the park's maintenance through the Pier 57 lease. In the next episode, we'll continue exploring the other piers along the Chelsea waterfront.